Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Estate Unpacked. Everything you ever wanted to know about real estate, but were afraid to ask. Today we're joined by our very special guest, attorney Natasha Selvaraj of Berlin Patten Ebling, who's going to explain to us the differences between wills and trusts and the impact that these documents have on the allocation of our real estate when we die. Natasha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And, I know this isn't a very sexy or a fun topic, but I think it's critically important that everyone have this special knowledge so that they can make really clear decisions about the future of their real estate. So if you would be kind enough to just start by telling us, what exactly does a will do for our real estate?
Sure. So a will is a document that's prepared for a specific individual and determines where their assets go after they pass. So it's something that a person would drop with their estate planning attorney and have on file, and then when something happens to them, they would then go through the probate process. There will be probated, and then assets will be allocated based upon what their will says. So that's similar to the stuff that you see in the movies where the reading of the will is where Susie finds out that grandma didn't really like her as much as the other grandkids and she wasn't left anything and everybody else got the beach house in Florida or whatever else grandma passed away with.
Okay, so let's just stop right there because I don't think that too many people really understand that if they have a will and they say specifically who they want their assets to go to, that those assets are still going to have to go through the probate process. I think, and I could be wrong, that most people think that since they have this document and it clearly states who they want it to go to, that it's an automatic transfer.
Yes, so you are not wrong. That is a very, very common misconception. I probably talk to a handful of people a year who someone's passed away, they haven't really done anything, but they know the property was left to them in a will. So they go, well, it's mine, the will says so. And it very well could be. However, the will still needs to go through the probate process. There's a couple of different ways that you can ensure you avoid the probate process, and an estate planning attorney can really guide you as to specifically what works for your situation in terms of all of your assets. But that's something that we often hear in the context of a real estate closing is, oh, I don't need to do anything special. I'm just going to take title to this property in my name because I have a will, and I'm going to update the will so that we know, which child or grandchild or collection of people is going to inherit this property should I pass away. And that's a very critical step. Probate can be a lengthy process. Can also be, it's an additional expense. So really thinking ahead and planning ahead can streamline that a little bit to make sure that you can avoid that. And I know you had asked about a trust. The trust is a great estate planning tool where you would create a trust which would be the owner of the property. So if something were to happen to me as trustee of my trust, I could within the trust say upon my passing, Linda, you're going to be the trustee of my trust, and then that would be a more automatic transfer because the property is owned by the trust and the person who's acting on behalf of the trust might change from time to time based on life circumstances, people passing away and things like that. But I think that a lot of people think of wills and trusts as the same thing, where they're like, oh yeah, I have a will, so I don't need to worry about all of these things, and unfortunately it doesn't get discovered until someone's passed away that, oh, they had a will, but we still have to go through probate, and people were under the impression that they didn't. Or more terrifyingly is the best way I could put it, I've had people who have had trusts and then not put that property in their trust because they figured they had a will, so that would be fine, and they've had these trusts and taken title to property in their individual names and passed away, and then we've been in situations where we've still had to go through probate. So I think it's very critical to make sure that people are thinking about that when they're purchasing real estate. What do they want to do with it? How do they want to hold it? And I know it sounds a little morbid, but I think it's helpful to think about it at that point because none of us want to think about buying something for us not to enjoy it, but you just never know.
Okay, so if I understand everything correctly, because that was a lot of information to take in, first of all, it sounds like probate is some sort of a legal process that takes place after someone passes away and they have a will on file that is going to ultimately allocate resources to the recipients that are listed in the will, but that it can be a lengthy process, it can take time. And while that's happening, the estate is still going to have to pay the carrying costs of the home. So they're paying the homeowner's insurance and
mortgage if
there's a mortgage, and all of them utilities and right
taxes.
So that's all a lot of money that's being drained from the beneficiaries unnecessarily.
That's a very good point. Yes. So they are incurring all those expenses for potentially an undetermined period of time.
Okay, so we definitely want to avoid that if we can. And it sounds like the trust is the best, or it is a wonderful tool or instrument, if you will, so that wouldn't happen. So if I understand correctly, if the property is titled to the trust, then it will bypass the probate process, and it will go somewhat automatically to the intended.
Yeah, so it would it would remain in the trust. It would just be the trustee of the trust who changes. And if the trust has specific language about upon the passing of the original trustee, they want assets to be allocated a certain way or whatever else, the trust would govern that. But it would not need to go through the probate legal process in order to get to that point. It would be managed by the trustee of the trust.
Wow, okay, so that's a lot. It would seem really that the most important step would be to see an estate planning attorney and to really lay out what your goals and your desires are with respect to your assets.
Yes, definitely recommend that. It's something that can be done at any time. It doesn't necessarily need to be done in conjunction with a real estate transaction. It can be done months or even years before you're thinking about buying something, and it can be done after. It's not the end of the world if you don't do it at closing. You want to do it soon after that to make sure that you're protected. And then in Florida, we do have homestead benefits, so that's always important to consider if you're a married couple purchasing real estate together.
Okay, well, it sounds like we could just keep going and going with one bit of information leads to more and more questions. So we're going to have to stop at this point, and we'll just wait and pick up where we left off with some other questions that folks might have. But this was a really, really excellent start. So we thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Real Estate Unpacked. If you feel that this information was helpful, please feel free to like us, share, and if you have any questions or if you have any topics that you would like us to speak with Natasha about next time, please let us know. We'll be happy to do so. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again soon.